Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the philosophy of Diogenes of Apollonia. I'm reading his work out of a Pre-Socratic's reader. So Diogenes was, according to Theophrastus, the last of the phsyiologoi, which were people who were primarily interested in the physical nature of the world. There are also indications that he may have been a doctor of some sort. There's references to how the body functions, the circulatory system, the eyes, the respiratory system, etc., etc. So there's some theory that Diogenes of Apollonia may have been somehow connected to medical practice, but he was a monist, which was very, very common among the ancient Greek philosophers. The Milesians, for instance, Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes were all in this same kind of school. And a lot of the pre-Socratics believed this. So basically monism, as a sort of quick reminder, is the theory that everything that exists consists of one base substance, and then there's disagreement from there about what that base substance is. For Diogenes of Apollonia, it was air, but some people said fire, some people said water, whatever it was. And there was disagreement about the nature of how things get differentiated, right? How all of the matter that we see comes to exist. So some people particularly the pluralists, Anaxagoras and Empedocles, argued that there was a wide range of things, but then people like Parmenides in particular argued that there was just one thing and there was no form of change. So there's different people who have different positions. Diogenes of Apollonia essentially argues that monism, that the stuff that is differentiated out of air is differentiated based on heat and intelligence. What exactly he means by intelligence is a little bit unclear, but I'll read you a couple of excerpts and you'll get a sense of this. So the first fragment I want to read to you is actually not about that necessarily, but it's an important philosophical point that the pre-Socratics and then later, to a lesser extent, Socrates and later philosophers would also embrace, the idea almost of first principles, right? So first principles in philosophy is basically the idea of getting down to a bedrock position that can no longer be logically questioned, right? So the Socratic method is meant to get to this, and then people like René Descartes would later come along and really make first principles fundamental to the idea of rationalist philosophy. So the first fragment I'm going to read to you from Diogenes of Apollonia is, "In my opinion, a person beginning any discourse must present a starting point or principle that is indisputable and an explanation or style that is simple and serious. You must establish a foundational point upon which to build any argument, and then the argument itself must proceed clearly and logically." This is a great sort of statement of the foundations of rationalist philosophy, and one of the things I find really, really interesting about the pre-Socratic philosophers is they were developing this rationalist worldview almost in contrast to a worldview built on theology, mythology, supernatural explanations for physical phenomena. So, now we're going to jump to the more important or more central seeming element of Diogenes of Apollonia's philosophy, is air-based monism. So he explains basically the logic of thinking that every bit of matter in the universe is air in this way. In my opinion, to sum it all up, all things that are differentiated from the same thing and are the same thing. And this is manifest. For if the things that are now in this cosmos, earth, water, air, fire, and all the rest that are seen to exist in this cosmos, if any one of these were different from another, being different in its own nature, and if it were not the case that being the same thing, it changed and was differentiated in many ways, they could not mix with each other in any way, nor could help or harm come to one from another, nor could a plant grow from the earth, nor an animal or anything else come to be unless they were so constituted as to be the same thing. But all these things, being differentiated out of the same thing, come to be different things at different times and return into the same thing. So this is kind of the classic monist argument, the sort of unitary argument that everything that exists is one thing or forms of one thing because nothing can ever be created out of nothing and nothing can ever be destroyed. So that's a very common argument among the Pre-Socratics. Diogenes of Apollonia foregrounds a slightly different argument, which is if things were fundamentally different, they could not interact, they could not coexist. Basically, this is an oil and water type situation, right? Like, you couldn't have a harmonious blending of the things because they're different things and their nature would necessarily exclude them. Whether that's a compelling argument or not, to us today, it was a compelling argument clearly to Diogenes of Apollonia. And he believed that the one thing that all stuff was air. And he explained this air-based monism and how things are differentiated in this way. And in my opinion, that which possesses intelligence is what people call air, and all humans are governed by it, and it rules all things. For in my opinion, this very thing is God, and it reaches everything and arranges all things, and is in everything. And there is no single thing which does not share in this. But no single thing shares it in the same way as something else, as anything else, for there are many forms both of air itself and of intelligence. For it is multiform, hotter and colder, drier and wetter, more stable and possessing a sharper movement, and unlimitedly many other alterations are in it, both of flavor and of color. And the soul of all animals is the same thing, air hotter than the air outside in which we are located, but much colder than the air near the sun. This heat is not identical in any two animals, since it is not identical even in any two humans, but it differs, not greatly, but so that they are similar. Moreover, it is impossible for any of the things that are being differentiated to be exactly like one another without becoming the same thing. Now, since the differentiation is multiform, also the animals are multiform, and many that are like one another in neither shape nor way of life nor intelligence on account of the large number of their differentiations. Nevertheless, all things live, see, and hear by means of the same thing, and all get the rest of their intelligence from the same thing. So again, heat and relative dry or wetness seem to really be the determining factors for a lot of pre-Socratic monist philosophers who argue that everything is the same matter in different forms, different variations. Again, Diogenes of Apollonia also talks about intelligence, And in my opinion, that which possesses intelligence is what people call air. What exactly he means by intelligence is not 100% clear, but the way that I understand it is basically he's saying that air has the capacity to differentiate itself. I think by intelligence, he means not intelligence in the way that we tend to use the word today, meaning smartness or cleverness or something like this, but intelligence more in the sense of creative potential. So in this way, we can understand this monist idea, right? And out of Diogenes of Apollonia's monist conception of the world actually comes a monist cosmology, an understanding of the universe and how the universe as a whole functions, which is rooted in this idea. And he talks about this in a couple of fragments, so I'm going to read those to you. So he says here, air is the element. There are unlimited worlds and unlimited void. The air is, by being condensed and rarefied, is generative of the worlds. Nothing comes to be from or perishes into what is not. The earth is round and is supported in the center of the cosmos and has undergone its process of formation through the rotation resulting from the hot and the solidification caused by the cold. Now, he's actually not entirely wrong here, based on my understanding, at least, of contemporary astrophysics, right? He's wrong that everything is air, but he's not necessarily, and he's also wrong that the Earth is the center of the cosmos. That we now know that's not true. But the idea that the Earth and all planets, or almost all planets, form when some force or another starts to create spin, and some larger object within space starts drawing other pieces in toward it through its larger gravitational pull. And the more stuff that gets pulled in, the larger the mass of that core object becomes, the greater the gravity, the higher the pressure. And because of that pressure, the higher the friction, and so heat is generated, and you get molten planet cores. I mean, there was no tools that Diogenes of Apollonia could have brought to bear to understand the formation of planets in the way that we understand it today. And yet he has this sense of it. While getting some things very, very wrong, he gets other things very, very right. And this is, again, one of the things I find really so fascinating about the philosophers, the scientists, the thinkers of the ancient world, not just ancient Greece, but across the ancient world, that they figured out these elements of existence that wouldn't be scientifically established until the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st centuries in some cases. Diogenes of Apollonia has this fairly spot-on, at least basic understanding of how planets form through the action of gravity. He just doesn't understand that it's not air. So that's one element. That's one of the fragments associated with his monist cosmology. The other one is this one. All things are in motion and there are infinite worlds. His account of cosmology is the following. The whole is in motion and comes to be rare in one place, dense in another. Where the dense part chanced to come together, it formed the earth by revolving, and the other things in the same way. The lightest things occupied the highest location and produced the sun. So again, he's not entirely wrong here. I mean, gravity does more or less work the way that Diogenes of Apollonia says it does in terms of planetary formation, the formation of solar systems, the formation of galaxies, all this stuff. It's gravity all the way down, basically. in my very, very limited understanding of astrophysics. But he's basically right. And again, we couldn't sort of scientifically confirm that using modern technology until fairly recently. I mean, millennia, or probably over a millennium at the very least, since the death of Diogenes of Apollonia, before we could scientifically confirm that planet formation basically works the way he says it does. Again, if you set aside the whole "the Earth is the center of the cosmos and everything is air" bit,